The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this.
If you wanted to find the ultimate escape, where in the world would you go? Back in the early 1980s, a retired couple searched the world for a haven in case of nuclear war. They found the place, even sent their minister a Christmas card from their peaceful new home. Then, the very next year, Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands and shattered their peaceful paradise. You can't escape, even on a remote island in the South Atlantic. Now, many people are troubled by the mess the world is in, not just with poor responses to the pandemic, but tensions and argy-bargy between big, powerful nations. And we each have our own share of problems: money troubles, the pandemic, sickness, bereavement. We can feel so helpless. At Christmas, we hear a lot of talk about the peace and joy God promises. But with the mess the world is in, you might well wonder, what has happened to the promises of God? In the days of the prophet Isaiah, around 700 years before Christ was born, the people of Judah were wondering, what has happened to the promises of God? They were the chosen people of God. To them belonged God's covenant and his promises of peace and prosperity. But the nation was surrounded by cruel and powerful oppressors. Of course, part of the reason for the calamity was the sinfulness of the people of Judah. They'd ignored their part of the covenant with God and fell deeper into idolatry and wickedness. Through the prophet Isaiah, God warned his people that he wouldn't tolerate this for long. The nation of Judah and the sacred city of Jerusalem were doomed because of their sin. But did that mean that God had abandoned his promises to build a kingdom of peace and prosperity? What has happened to the promises of God? Well, this gloomy, desperate scene is how things were when Isaiah declared these words of hope. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. The northern region, the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali, was the first to feel the Assyrian onslaught. The northern territories of Israel were effectively wiped out. Yet God had not abandoned his promises. Isaiah says, light will first shine in that darkened region. God promises further that he will bring an end to the bloody conflict and peace will come to the people at last as the debris of war is cleaned up and burnt. And lasting peace will be achieved through a great king that God will set over them. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Wonderful Counselor. Here is a ruler who can make wise decisions and plans and carry them out. He's guided by God himself and needs counsel from no one else. What a king. Mighty God, The king is more than a man guided by God's Spirit and sharing his will. But the promise is not for a king like that, but a king who is God himself. That is why he is able to carry out his wise plans. What a king. Everlasting Father. This king will rule the nation with fatherly care. He will do everything for them out of a deep, loving concern for them. What a king. Prince of Peace. He brings about peace with peaceful means and rules over a people of peace according to peaceful principles. What a king. And what a kingdom. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. This kingdom grows like a peaceful bombardment across the earth. This government will never end, and no one will ever want to change it. Always just, a king who is righteousness personified. This is even better than David's kingdom. No, God hasn't forgotten his promise. But when and how did Isaiah expect all this to happen? The calamity continued. The darkness deepened. In just over 100 years, Jerusalem was in ruins and the best of the nation was carried off into exile. God has made more promises, but it seems nothing has changed. What has happened to the promises of God? So when did Isaiah expect all this to happen? Could he have ever imagined just how God would keep the promise? More in just a moment.